Tonight's topic: factors that can help predict how ready your relationship is for marriage.
What's up, Blueprint family? It is Marriage Fit Friday. So, we wanted to give you some marriage fit skills, details, and information pertaining to the topic, like my wife just said, about factors that can help predict how ready, happy, and stable your relationship is for marriage.
Yeah, that's a big one,
Right,
right?
most definitely. So we've gave you a lot of details this week about conflict resolution, trying
Mhm.
to get to the point of marriage, trying to sustain your marriage, preventing divorce. So we just wanted to provide some insight on pretty much
Factors to look for
right.
that you know for sure. Like, kind of along with the green lights and the red lights that we looked at all, well, red flags that we looked at all week. What factors say that, hey, we're probably pretty much ready?
Right.
And I think let's dive on in since we got our followers following in. Thank you for
Yep.
tuning in.
Thank you for tuning in.
Our first factor is your personal background and context about relationships and your thought patterns that you build up, especially during childhood. So, kind of looking at your perpetual thoughts for women in particular, in my wife economics course, we look at the perpetual thoughts that you have surrounding men and your relationships because they'll have a huge impact on the types of relationships you have and what you think of those relationships going forward.
hmm Um, yeah, basically, I would say, maintain positive thoughts, but overall, just being conscious of how you think of your relationship, especially if you are approaching wanting to get married. So just review on those of the positives, I would say, and try to build on those.
Yeah, and
So
like, what was your relationships with and with your parents and with possibly kind of your family structure? Like, what did that look like?
mhm,
What was your relationship with your mother and your father? If you're a man in particular, what did your relationship look like with your mother? If you were a woman, what did your relationship look like with your father? Are you one that had a good relationship to where you look up to men and you value them in your relationships and you're, open to their guidance and their love? Or even as a man growing up as a boy, was your mom critical of you or created a type of environment where you're kind of standoffish to women? Kind of looking at your overall impact of how your past affected your framework of thought now will really determine kind of a little predictive factor in how successful your relationship will be.
right. And then to be honest with you, a lot of us come from single parent backgrounds, so our outlook on relationship and marriage is, it's kind of dismal. We really don't have a good background, when it comes to that. So, like my wife said, we're going to give you some good tips and some good advice on on what that structure should look like for you, and then also how you can carry that into your relationship and approach marriage as well.
Hmm. Yeah, because your family dynamics and how you grew up will really play a big part in if you see your wife, or for example, if you had your mother, it's growing up in a single family household, like my husband was saying, if you had a mother who was leading the house, you may be more apt to allow your wife to kind of take a more leading role. That's often seen in more of a beta male personality, especially if he didn't see a father playing a leading role in his household. So that can be kind of intimidating for him to want to take on because he had never seen that for himself. So,
Right,
yeah.
right, most definitely.
And talking about that with your spouse is also a huge thing too, because you definitely want to have that conversation about whether or not you feel comfortable with certain dynamics based off of how you were raised. And then even trying to be understanding to the other dynamics that are out there and that other people have lived through so that you can kind of come to a common ground within your own relationship. Because it's not just saying just how your parents' relationship was is going to be how yours was, but if you can look at the habits and behaviors that you've seen as acceptable during that time will play a huge part in what you bring into your relationship and your marriage as acceptable ways of communicating.
Right, most definitely. And then also too, find other resources as well. If you do not know what a proper marriage is supposed to look like, this study married couples. Ask them questions. By all means, use our show as a resource for that as well. At any time, you all can uh type in the chat, ask us questions, or either submit questions to wifeconomics.com/submit a question, and we'll be more than glad to guide you through and answer your questions and give you some insight in our opinions as well.
Yep. Next general factor to look at in your relationship is kind of your overall relationship context and what are the things that are going on currently in your relationship or have taken place that you all have established as, I guess, normal. So identifying how do your spouse gets along with your in-laws or your new family that you want to introduce. Is there kind of a rift there? Is there something that needs to be addressed before you take that next step of marriage? Or is it good to go? Are your parents and your spouse getting along? Yeah. So some other relationship context would be like the qualities of the relationship itself. So are there any unresolved issues that may have occurred within the relationship that probably need to be addressed before you take the next step of marriage?
Mm-hmm.
Also too, any little things that may come up later, like maybe financial issues. Are there certain things that need to be established, like who's going to take on the more providing role? What are the overall dynamics of the relationships going to look like in terms of roles? Who's going to play what? Definitely make sure that you have that relationship context talked about and really established way before you decide, okay, I'm gonna get married.
Right. Yeah, you want to lay down the framework and the foundation for the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Have that communication, have that conversation up front, because you don't want to get into the marriage and think that everything has changed. And realistically, you all have not laid down a proper framework on how the relationship is supposed to work. Traditionally, men lead the family, and traditionally, men are the breadwinners of the household. So have that conversation with your spouse, and then the wife is the supportive backbone of the household, and also to her husband. Lay that framework down for your household, and also to make sure that because you don't want to move further along into your relationship, and then you having issues and confused as to who's doing what. One big thing I hear about is who's staying home and taking care of the kids. You want to establish that before you have children in your marriage. Who's going to provide childcare for the children whilst your spouse is at work, or maybe both of you all are working. Then you have to decide who's going to cook when you all come home. Are you all really going to just live off of fast food for your family? There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to think of health and nutrition as well. You want to be healthy in your family and also in your relationship. So those are just some framework things that you do need to make concrete in your relationship, and you do not want to get sidetracked in your relationship when it comes to context and details and how the roles in your relationship is supposed to work.
Because that's a big factor. If there's some rift there, you're probably going to have some discord down the line, and you definitely want to make sure to get that addressed way before you get married.
Most definitely.
Yep.
Don't go blind into your marriage, not setting up the foundation of an understanding. Like, you all of a sudden your wife wants to work, and then you all had decided you all did not decide at all in the beginning what your spouse's what your wife's roles were, whether she wanted to work or not, or be a housewife.
Or even if you can afford to do that, like, again, financial issues, looking and see what that would look like. What's the goal plan as a family? Is that going to be a goal for you guys one day, that your woman does stay home? Or the man, if you are not the sole breadwinner at the time, make sure you establish, how are we going to make this a goal? If that is going to be a goal, how are we going to apply our whole ideas of life and what we think the relationship should go, how are we going to put that together and so that we're both happy in the relationship?
Right. Because believe it or not, if your wife is a housewife, she can also help you advance in your careers. She
Mhm.
could be typing resumes for you, helping you that way. Also helping you point out situations to where, there's job openings and you might want to apply for those
Mhm.
certifications and things that she reads about that you can possibly take as well. So consider those things in your relationship and work as a team in order to excel,
Yeah.
especially in careers.
Yeah.
Another thing too, before you all get married, it might be an ideal thing to get a credit check. Both of you all should know the standing of you all's credit before you all get married. Credit determines a lot in today's society, especially if you want to own a home. It's harder now to even get a mortgage because of high interest rates, inflation. So you want to be um, uh, greatly aware of your spouse's credit score, or if they even have credit, or if they're coming in with a lot of debt. You want to
Mhm.
know that, because that is a conversation that you do want to talk about on how you're going to take care of your college school debt and how you all are going to pay that down and repair credit so that one day you all can own a home if you do not already do so.
Mhm.
So those are things that you do want to consider,
Yeah.
because you don't want to try to do all of this down the road and all of a sudden you can't afford a home or can't
Mhm.
get into a home.
Yeah.
Talk about where you want to live, close to your spouses, parents. If that's a thing, they can possibly help with childcare if you all both are wanting to work.
Mhm.
Talk about that. Another thing too, before you all have children, you might want to get genetic tests. That is a real thing, because medical bills are expensive, and knowing whether you have certain traits, such as
Mhm.
like sickle cell trait,
Mhm.
you want to be conscious and aware of that. Once you bring a child in this world, they may have sickle cells, so you want to
Mhm.
be prepared for those challenges in the case that you all are having children, and all of and you all are blessed with a child but they have some sort of disability.
Mhm.
Those are things that you can be made aware of prior to getting into a marriage.
Mhm.
And those things do determine a lot as far as finances and time. So you want to make sure that all of that is transparent. Those are just some, jewels that we're dropping for you all, and some things that we didn't think of either prior to us getting married.
Mhm.
But we just want to make sure that that's out there, and then that is a topic of discussion as well.
Yeah.
You know.
And another point on that too, the relationship context, as far as when you're playing to strengths. Maybe if you are looking at the overall financial picture, for example, maybe you have your spouse, the woman, is in a better position to lead the family ahead more so than the man because maybe her credit's better or she's already in a career, a position. Just make sure that you're playing to each other's strengths. It's okay for the woman to take a lead role in this time. And if the man really is passionate about wanting to instead switch that, make sure you guys have established a plan for you all to do that. Work together. It's not about just one person getting ahead in the relationship and the other person not. It's really about you coming together and working towards each other's strengths, and how can you balance playing each other's strengths so that you both benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that plays a big part in relationship context and how the factors of whether or not your marriage is going to last for the long haul.
Right.
Yeah. Up next, your another general factor to look at would be your own personal attitudes, your skills, your personalities. How do these blend together? We talked a lot about personalities last week with
Mm-hmm.
the alpha, beta, sigma, theta.
Omega,
Yeah, omega. All the
delta.
different types of personality traits. Those are big to really, if you aren't familiar with those, go back onto our channel and check those out, because those play a big part in the dynamics of how well you guys' personalities mesh.
Right. Um, the thing here is that, I mean, we all have heard of zodiac signs, and some people like to do zodiac or whatever the case may be, but we chose those type of personality traits because they're more so simple to understand, and then also too they're easier to point out in people as opposed to asking them what their birthday is. You can
Mhm.
tell an alpha male when they're in the room. You can tell a beta male when they're
Mhm.
in the room. Now we
Mhm.
know those things. So making sure that your personalities match is a big key component on whether or not your relationship is going to be successful, or if you're going to enjoy being in your relationship. Because 9 times out of 10, two alphas in the same room in a relationship are going to butt heads more often than an alpha and beta in the room.
Yeah.
There's roles, these are real life situations. These are real roles and personality types that we all just need to pay attention to prior to approaching marriage.
Mhm.
Now I'm not saying that you all two alphas can't make it. What I'm saying is that you all are going to challenge each other a
Mhm.
lot in your relationship. And if that is something that you're wanting to do, then by all means go ahead and go for it.
Yeah, just be really good at conflict resolution,
Lucian,
which
right.
is also a personality trait. That's a green light. Some of the things we've gone over, red lights and green lights, all this week talking about that. If you're alpha male or alpha female, how are your conflict resolution skills? How are you able to take in other people's not personal, other people's opinions and their perspectives on situations, or are you just put off to it completely? If you are beta, how well are you at getting a little better at being making sure that you're getting value for all the work that you put in and not being taken advantage of? So
Right. And then also to be aware of your own personality traits and things that you need to work on
mhm,
as well. So, just because you recognize yourself as an alpha type person doesn't mean that you can just run all over your spouse, your husband, or your wife because they have a beta female male mentality. It doesn't work that way. You need to practice some sort of reserve and discipline when it comes to your personality. Bless you. When it comes to your personality, and understand that kindness overall is what the goal is. Because you're trying to make the relationship work, not trying to break it apart
mhm,
either. So also, and then that the mentality, what was it, the type of personality that likes to shut down when they're approached with conflict. I think it's like, I don't know, one of the omegas or delta personalities, one of those. Those are things that you need to work on. Recognize those things and fix it, because it's not fair to your spouse that they are feeling left out, especially like there's an argument or whatever the case may be, and then you always just run away from the
mhm.
argument. Now, I've said it, cool down first before you approach the situation again and try to resolve it. But if you're always doing that, recognize that and try to get some help and try to fix that, because the whole goal is to stay in their relationship. And people like that and traits like that, personalities like that, can tear the relationship apart.
Mhm.
Communication. You got to understand that you got to have a strong level of communication, or develop a strong level of communication. It's not going to come overnight. It is something that may take years to develop when it comes to a marriage. Communication overall is what's going to keep a relationship successful.
Mhm.
Bottom line, because if you're not a good communicator in your relationship, try to figure out ways in which you can be more successful in trying to get your point across in a professional manner, even though you're dealing with your spouse. So in a respectful manner. So
Yeah. And how well you cope with stress, that
mhm.
plays a big part. Look at that. How well are you able to handle yourselves when you're really triggered? Do you just fly off the handle, or are you able to take those methods to calm yourself down, like my husband was saying, before you deal with your spouse anymore? That will play a big part in the overall longevity of your relationship. But the good thing about all the personality traits that we covered, and personality traits in general, is that you can work on them. They aren't things that are set in stone and they can never be changed. If you actually take the time to first recognize, okay, these are some unhealthy behaviors that I may have picked up, that's okay. I will work to change them. Do that within your relationship. And like we talked about yesterday, have some grace with your spouse. If you recognize, especially, that a lot of these unhealthy behaviors come from childhood, have some grace and understanding and love with your spouse as they actively work towards gaining healthier behaviors. That's going to play a big part in your overall longevity.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, because before I got into a relationship, before my wife got into a relationship and approached marriage, I was unaware of childhood traumas. I didn't think much of that at all. But realistically, like how we were raised up as children has a lot to do with how we communicate in our marriages with the closest people around you. That has a lot to do with how well you all can get along.
Mhm.
So that was something that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, how many green light traits do you have on your own that you adopted from childhood or have developed over time? Or do you have some red flags that you yourself might need to work on? Some so in general, some good individual traits that you should look for is like being social, flexible, and assertive, and having a good level of self-esteem would definitely play a huge part in your overall viewpoint of your relationship and how much love you actually accept from your partner. Because if you yourself are struggling with low self esteem and an inability to see the goodness in yourself, you're probably going to have a hard time not only accepting it from your spouse, but also giving it to your spouse in the long run. So
Right.
definitely pay attention to things like that as well.
And then also too, the way that you communicate. I was talking to my wife today that I learned in management courses is that everyone receiving communication. So be conscious of how your spouse receives communication. Don't try to trigger them into getting upset about things. If you know that certain words or actions trigger your spouse, avoid those by all means. You're not trying to win an argument. You're trying to approach a resolution and resolve.
Mhm.
So don't try to wake up and choose violence. I like to say about an argument. It's not Arguments are not for winning when it comes into relationships. They're for ending and resolving. That's what they're
Mhm.
for
Yep.
too. So and then also too, like my wife had threw out some traits out there. I believe that men should be decisive in their relationships. The relationship. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to marriage. So men, be decisive in your actions and your decision making. Because you're the leader of your family. Now that you are a husband, or now that you're a husband, you want to approach marriage. Be that leader for your family. Be that person that your wife look up to as a provider, protector. Be decisive in your decision making, because more than likely you're going to be approached by your wife, if you have not already have been, and she's going to ask you, honey, where are we going to eat tonight? The small stuff like that. Be decisive in your decision making. Choose that place and then go ahead and go for it. Now that's just a small example of things, but I'm pretty sure that there may be some more major situations that may occur in life. So you have to stand strong in your decision making as a man, and lead your family through whatever situation that may be. So, the worst case scenarios that we can think of is like natural disasters, floods, and things like that. The man should be equipped to understand how to get through an emergency situation. You know, don't learn CPR. Take the family to learn CPR, things like that.
Mhm.
Those are better skill sets and things, and that will build your character. And then overall, it will provide leadership skills within the man to help establish roles in the relationship.
And keep things going.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Skills, all about building up skills. These aren't things that you have to know how to do right off the back. It's okay if you didn't. One thing in particular that was a reason why I was very inspired to create Wife Economics was because I recognize there aren't any courses that help support women on their journey of being wives and understanding all that it takes and all the dynamics and the roles that you fill when you play the role of a wife. So to really help you in understanding that is a big part, and I guess how comfortable you are in playing those roles and being able to even articulate what it is you want to do within
Right.
your marriage.
I mean, and also too, you should have already, but before approaching marriage, you should have already, especially women, ask your man, what type of skills do you want? Do you want yourself to have for your husband? If you don't already know these things, but more than likely, men want a kind woman, a supportive woman, and then the plus side things are a woman who can cook, a woman who knows how to clean a house. Now, I'm not saying that a woman should always be doing these things, but the majority of the time, especially if you all are having children, the mother is more than likely is going to be cooking and cleaning, because the man is more so going to be at work, or he should be
Mhm.
at work. So be prepared for having those type of conversations on skill set and things like that. And
Right.
and then also to take initiative. And if you don't know how to do these things, study it, look it up, take some cooking courses, things like that. Go, hire a maid for a weekend and see what she does as
Mhm.
far as cleaning goes.
Yeah.
That's the quickest way to find information, is to pay for it and study it.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. So like my wife said, like her wife economics courses would be is a great way for women to get those wife details under
Yeah.
her belt.
And being a feminine asset, knowing how to use your feminine traits in a way that will benefit your relationship and help you to get more out of your relationship and your man, and overall create a happy dynamic within your relationship. Yep. So one more thing about your own personality, attitudes, and skills is, in particular, making sure that you are having a good self-care plan put in place alongside your relationship. Because believe it or not, how well you take care of yourself and your mental, mind, body, and spirit, all of that will play a huge impact in how you feel within your relationship. And kind of touched on this a little bit when I was talking about self-esteem, but even if you're tired, you will probably be a little cranky and not in the best viewpoint or mindset to have certain conversations or be in certain ways or places or do certain things with your spouse. So just being aware of like your level of self-care, knowing when I'm feeling drained, when I need to recharge, so that way you're not bringing those personal issues that needs to be taken care of. There's nothing wrong with their needs. We all need to have a good level of self-care, but making sure to take care of yourself so that then you're not putting all of that on your spouse, or even just bringing in your low cup into your relationship. Yeah.
With your baggage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or I say your low cup because when you're not filled up and you're, yourself, you're
Oh
you're
yeah.
low and you can't possibly pour from a cup that's empty.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yep. And then also too, on the other side, your spouse should recognize those things as well. And I talked about triggers too. Talk about your triggers with your spouse. Those are things that I didn't think of before I got into a marriage, is that what triggers you or make you upset.
Mhm.
You know, if you all can sincerely talk about these things, then you can prevent those situations into becoming arguments.
Mhm.
So, yep, talk about those things.
Yeah. Number 4, the factor that probably plays the biggest overall predictive measure and element in whether or not you'll be happy in your relationship is, what are your habits as a couple? All right. So, how do you behave as a couple? What are your dynamics? What are the things that you just naturally have adapted and done with each other? For example, what's your level of cohesion? How often can you spend time together? Did COVID come in and make you realize, ooh, I do not like being with my spouse a lot? Or was that a time where you grew closer together because you got to spend so much more time together? Look at the things that you were doing together and whether or not you're setting set times for you to build a level of closeness. Do you have activities that you like to do together? Do you have different things that you have built up, rituals that you have built up within your relationship that you look forward to? All of those things are great factors in determining, hey, do we got this for the long haul? Because those are going to be the things that you need, especially when things go south, because they will. Relationships are up and down. So in a moment like we talked about yesterday, in a moment, if you do dislike your spouse and something has happened, what are the things that you could do to help, what was it, to revamp
Rekindle.
it? Yep, rekindle your love and your relationship. And these would be those things. What were the things that you did or do in your marriage or relationship that really help bring you close together and establish a good, tight-knit, cohesion relationship together?
Hmm. And sometimes those are some teamwork activities
Hmm.
that you all can do together.
Yeah.
Whether you all like to go to the gym together and help each other work out, or go to the park and talk, hike, things like that. Play some sort of game together, or just go out with other couples, and talk with other couples as well.
Yeah.
So by all means, that you know understanding your what makes you happy, and then hobbies, those are things that you all can both do together as well.
Hmm.
you know
Yeah, and what's your intimacy look like?
Mhm.
That plays a huge part. Do you guys touch? Are you affectionate towards each other? And how often are you intimate?
Excuse me.
Believe it or not, intimacy plays a huge part in the longevity of your relationship. And in fact,
Yes, it
we
does.
talk about in my wife economics course how many days apart does it often play where you will have some type of rift in your relationship based off of how often you have sexual relationships. Studies have found couples that only engage in sex once a week, once a month, definitely proved to be at a lower satisfaction than those who engage at it, once every day, of course, or once every week. Kind of times in paying attention to the times where you are very, very intimate with each other and the times where you're not intimate with each other will also help you to identify that, okay, maybe there's not nothing going on, but maybe we're dealing with the stresses of life. If you just are in a relationship and you have just had kids, or if you are struggling with some type of issue within your life, sometimes that can make your intimacy drop. But just being aware of that, like, hey, wow, we haven't had sex in a couple of days. Maybe we need to do something to kind of keep that going to make sure that we aren't falling into the trap of neglecting each other, because that will definitely plummet your relationship.
Right. And then talk about what type of, things you like to do during sex.
Mm-hmm.
You should have you and your spouse should have full disclosure, transparency when you all talk to each other, especially about sex. I know, we already had a discussion about maturity and things like that. We're both adults, but two grown people and married people should be able to talk about anything and whatever they like to do during sex. So be open with your
Mm-hmm.
spouse, because you don't want to create a lot of anxiety when it comes to sex. That might be one of the issues where people don't have sex a lot. It's because they're having issues with anxiety dealing with sex.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about everything that everything, what you like about it and what you don't,
Mm-hmm.
and what turns you on, and then what doesn't,
Yeah.
so just be full transparent when it comes to that topic,
Mm-hmm.
because the whole thing is that you both are trying to find um maximum enjoyment out of sex. Sex is not supposed to be stressful. It's supposed to be something that you enjoy, and it's something that's fun. It strengthens your relationship. It helps. It's healthy. Like what they said, 30 minutes of sex is equivalent to 3 days of exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So it's healthy for you. And then what they said, men need uh at least 25 ejaculations out of the month to help prevent prostate cancer. So also there's benefits to sex, not only just the enjoyment of it. So just be mindful of things like that, women and men in your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Don't use sex as a bargaining chip. Sex shouldn't be something to where your wife, you pay your wife for sex. Why are you paying your wife for sex? Sex is a duty that your wife signed up for when she took her vows, believe it or not. Same thing for men. Men enjoy sex. Women do too. I know they do too, but it shouldn't be something that you have to bargain for in your relationship. Why are you bargaining for sex in your relationship?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of, that's weird to me. I don't
Yeah.
understand that. But if there's issues to where you need to bargain for sex, you all need to really talk about that, rectify that situation and see what the issues are. But
Certainly before you're married.
before you're
Yeah.
married, yeah.
Mhm.
Because for men, to be honest with you, women, if you're not having sex with your man on the schedule or on when he wants it or when he feels as if he needs it, more than likely he's not going to be interested in putting a ring on your finger. I'm just going to be honest with you, because you can more than likely get that from somewhere else. Truth be told, and women too, but you have to be fully committed to your spouse and compromise and help each other and negotiate, and to make the relationship fun and exciting and enjoyable for each other. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I like what you said about being open and vulnerable. I think that in general is a big factor of your level of success in your relationship. Because if you don't feel 100% comfortable, open, and vulnerable with your spouse, you're not quite ready for
You're
marriage yet.
not at
You want to
all.
be at that complete level of openness where you are one. That's literally
You
how
could
it
talk
is.
about
Yeah,
any and
you
everything.
are one person. That's the ideal way to approach a marriage and a overall relationship, because then you'll make sure that you move as a unit.
Right. And then especially if you can, like I said, those triggers, if you all can recognize the triggers, in those areas where you don't want to talk about, then then you know how to avoid arguments and
Mhm.
things like that as well. So um knowing all of that stuff will add that level of cohesiveness
Yeah.
to your relationship. Make sure you do have those talks before marriage, in relating to things that may make you upset, cause anxiety, but also more so things that you enjoy and things that make you happy as well.
Yep. And we talked about this a little bit last week, but the overall dynamics of control and power within your relationship. Make sure you're not competing with each other. Is there any type of dynamic where you may find that you're competing with your
Those
spouse?
power struggles.
Don't have those within your relationships, and recognize if you have them, make sure you're working on that. Don't allow that to stay within your relationship, because that is definitely something that will cause dissatisfaction if one person is feeling like the other person has control or dominion over them.
Right.
That's never the case. You don't want to do that.
No, not at all. You don't want to feel small in your relationship
Yeah.
at all. But there is a level of submissiveness
Hmm.
that women should exhibit in their feminine qualities.
Hmm.
And I believe that a man in the relationship shows more characteristics of leadership
Yeah.
in the family. So I'll just be mindful of that.
Hmm.
You know, a lot of times men do not like overbearing women or women who nag them all day long, especially after work.
Hmm.
I don't know anybody who likes to raise their hand and say, "Who likes to be nagged all day?" So be mindful of the way that you're communicating with your spouse. Make sure that I talked about that before, being having a professional and respectful relationship,
Hmm.
even though it's a non even though it's in an informal setting. You and your relationship is informal or can be informal, but have that same level of respect for your spouse, men and women.
Hmm.
Because you're in this for the long haul. But at any moment in time, when you all start name calling and disrespecting each other, those are areas in which it can be grounds for separation or divorce,
And
depending on
certainly
how
not get
extreme.
married. Yeah.
Right. And certainly not get married. Right. If you're seeing those type of, if those things are consistent before marriage, then yeah, by far you're not ready for
Yeah.
marriage.
Yeah. And look at the give and take in the relationship. Take a peek at maybe having a conversation about who feels, what is it? Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? Is it 90-10? Like that's, something that you have to talk about on both sides, making sure that the man feels, how he feels, and the woman feels how she feels. And then you guys coming together and say, okay, this is where we want this to go. Sometimes in some relationships, it's not always going to be 50-50, and it will be 70-30. Maybe that's the case sometimes, especially considering if a spouse is sick or like you have some type of extenuating circumstance. So sometimes you will have moments where one spouse will be contributing more or less to the relationship, but just making sure that on a overall basis there's give and take, and certainly appreciation if one spouse is at the moment doing a little less than the other spouse, making sure to be very appreciative and respectful and loving for that's taking place. So,
Especially during your wife's time of the month,
oh
during her
yeah.
period. I think we talked about hormones, and the fact of the matter is, guys, your wife is not able to give her all while she's menstruating. That is just the bottom line. I found that out while in my marriage with my wife. It can become debilitating to women, and they can't get out the bed and cook you
Yeah.
breakfast. So provide her breakfast in bed for those days when she needs help. You know,
Yeah.
because it's all of this in we talk about reciprocated energy. She's putting out a lot of energy for you during the week, and just during her time of the month, you can do the same thing for her as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
So find that balance. Pay attention to those situations when you all both can support each other when at your lows.
Mhm.
That overall, if you can do that, that will help you know predict whether or not you all can have a successful relationship
Yeah.
and can approach marriage.
Yeah, that's a huge point. Women,
Mhm.
definitely talk to your man ahead of time of what your cycles look like. That plays a huge role, especially if you have issues that make it, like my husband was saying, debilitating to where you are in bed. That's a thing. Make sure that you're having this open conversation with your spouse ahead of time so he knows, hey, this is what's going on. Or maybe men too, approach your woman about like, hey, in the mornings, I don't like doing such and such and such. So kind of back off on me. I'm not a morning person,
Mhm.
recognizing your man's moods and his hormone levels. Testosterone plays a big part, rise and fall throughout the day. Recognizing those levels and being able to play to those strengths and work at those times where it's actually best and ideal for both of y'all will get a lot done in the overall long term of your marriage versus if you're just more so focused on how you want things and not really taking in consideration other things that contribute to that.
Right, and then also too, before marriage, another point is to disclose medical history.
Yeah.
So if you have a situation to where you have diabetes or something,
Hmm.
or asthma, or extreme allergies or something like that, you want to disclose all that information to your spouse before marriage. And you don't
Hmm.
want to bring them into the relationship not knowing that, oh, I didn't know that you have you can't do certain things,
Hmm.
or you can't eat certain foods, or whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
So by far, if you've gone that far before marriage and didn't discuss those things, you really need to disclose and make that transparent.
Yeah, and being open to that. Like, we're not saying, oh, if your spouse has some gluten allergy and you don't like gluten-free noodles or whatever, like having a conversation about that and figuring out, okay, how can we compromise? Those little things may not seem like something that makes a big deal, but you will care in the long-term span of your marriage if you haven't established what things, how we're going to carry things, what are we going to eat, what are we going to do, like just knowing a full picture of your relationship context will play a huge part in, yeah, the factors of what keeps your marriage together.
Right.
Yep. So I think we have one more factor, which was just your conflict and communication skills. And we kind of talked about that when it goes back to the personality types and your own personal skills. That, of course, is a big factor on its own because we all know, like my husband said, communication plays a huge part. So just looking at that and your overall dynamic and how well you speak to each other. Do you guys joke a lot? Do you guys have fun with each other? Are you nice when you talk to each other? Or do you not like your husband or your boyfriend's humor? Is that something that you need to talk about? Are you often getting offended by his jokes? These are things that you need to talk about. Is
And
your,
triggers.
yeah, just knowing like things that you, how your relationship dynamic will continue to communicate and grow throughout time is a big part because you want to be comfortable with each other. You don't want to have to stifle who you are for the sake of, your spouse.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. No anxiety. So you want to
Mhm.
communicate to the point where there's no anxiety in the relationship,
Mhm.
because that overall will make it easy, way easy to communicate. You
Mhm.
don't want to feel like you walking on eggshells
Yeah.
in your relationship, by
And
all means.
and are you resolving conflicts,
Right.
actively resolving conflicts and not just
Ignoring it, putting
yeah,
it off.
and letting it go and then letting it build up. Like those things matter, especially if you keep carrying it on to the next thing and the next thing. It's just become a perpetual cycle of the same argument. So making sure you're actually resolving those conflicts, that will play a huge, huge part in whether or not you're going to be able to move forward in your relationship.
Right. Because those things can cause irreconcilable differences in
Hmm.
your relationship, and you don't know why all of a sudden my wife is just shutting down and is blowing up at me.
Hmm.
I don't want to be in this relationship anymore.
Yeah.
So that's where that's a reason why irreconcilable differences may occur. I mean, or either, also two women, be mindful of realistic goals,
Mm-hmm.
realistic what you
Expectations.
expectations,
Mhm.
realistic expectations. I hear this a lot with women today, that they want their man to be a certain way, a certain type, have this much money or whatever before they can marry me. Realistically, ladies, men on average, people on average don't make six figures. They make around 45, 50,000, 55,000 here in the United States. So be prepared and strategize on how you're going to get your man to make those six figures. That is a real thing that you can do in your relationship. If that's what you want, build your man up. Build your man up who you're with now to get there. Especially if he has good leadership qualities and he is a provider protector, why not? You know, and the thing that we see in this society is that women like to hypergamy. My dad gave me this term and kept telling me about it. Women like to trade up on men like it's a car that they're
Mhm.
driving. We showed that video of the girl at the gas station riding with a guy with that drives in a Toyota Camry, and she wanted to talk to the guy in the Corvette. Women stop doing that, because what you're doing, why that man that you have currently can, in 6 months, a year from now, be driving a Corvette with you. So don't throw your relationships out of the window because you think that you can get something better. Because
Mhm.
more often than not, you're not. You're not going to get anything better, and you're going to be left alone. So
Yeah.
don't let that happen to you. By all
Don't.
means, don't let that happen to you.
Yeah.
Don't think that there's something better than what you got when what you got is already working.
Mhm.
Don't jump ship on your relationship in that way.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Take the time to figure out the skills that you can do and learn in order to actively conflict resolve and work towards solutions
Right.
within your
Because that's all
relationships.
it is. A lot of people, if irreconcilable differences is the number one reason for divorce, that is all that means, is that you all are not taking the time to conflict resolve. You
Mhm.
may feel as if you all can't. We can't agree to disagree.
Mhm.
You
Accept differences. Yeah.
accept differences, or you can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
But at the same token, okay, if that argument falls by the wayside, and then now that's going to become a trigger for both of you, recognize that being a trigger and just leave it alone.
Mhm.
Set it aside. If you all can't conflict resolve about it,
Mhm. Until you can figure out a healthier way of going about
you
it.
may
Like,
need counseling. You may need
mhm.
counseling just to resolve the issue, and there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
There really isn't. Or you may need to seek the advice of a third party or another married couple
Mhm.
who's going to be keep it real with you.
Mhm.
That's all you really need, is somebody to communicate with, someone to talk to
Yeah.
about your differences and your issues. And it's okay to make it transparent, but don't make it public.
Yeah.
What to the don't make it available to the whole public to
Mhm.
see.
Right.
Just put up an effort to try to conflict resolve in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us don't know how to do that. We're selfish, we're stubborn, and we don't want to resolve and negotiate
Mhm.
conflicts. We want it to go our way. But we need to grow up and be mature about our relationships and understand we're doing this for our children. We're staying in our relationship for our children, and then also too, we're staying in this because we can make a safe space for our spouse, and a level of higher communication with each other.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. In fact,
Mhm.
that's probably a factor within itself, how well, if you can analyze how well you are alike and the thoughts and beliefs that you do both have together, so that then you can accept other, differences that you may have,
Mhm.
but yet be able to come together and form common ground. So definitely look at how well you guys can do that. That will play a huge part in conflict resolution and everything. So, yeah, overall, do you want to summarize? You want me to read it, summarize?
Sure, I can summarize it.
Okay.
All right, factors that can help predict how ready, happy, and stable your relationship is for marriage. Number one, your personal background and relationship context.
Mhm.
Number two, the relationship background, context, and qualities.
Mhm.
Number three, individual traits and behaviors. Number four, your traits and interactions as a couple.
Yeah. And all of these factors will work together within themselves. So you'll look at the factor of, okay, how was my personal background? What are the beliefs and the habits that I have adopted from my childhood? How do they apply to my now relationship? What does that look like? What does the dynamic in the context of the relationship look like? How overall, how does our families work together? How does what is it, ancestral DNA comes together? Are we looking at health issues that we need to address? Are we looking
Genetic,
at, yeah,
genetic.
financial issues that we may need to address? How does all of that apply to that based off of that? And then look at your own personal traits. Are there things within yourself that you need to address? Are there any self-care things that need to be implemented so that you can better be equipped to handle the issues that you go through within a relationship? So how well you are able to personally handle that. And then lastly, your interactions and traits as a couple. What does that look like? How do you guys perform and work out together as a couple? That plays huge part. So all of those factors definitely work together.
How do
One and
you
one.
all how you all communicate as far as understanding your roles in your relationship?
Yeah.
And then, like we talked about sex, like
Hmm.
how you all are alleviating anxiety when it comes to sex.
And how much sex do you have? Yep.
Yep.
We said it. That plays a part.
Right. So it's how you all communicate and also conflict resolve.
Yeah.
So those are things to just be mindful of.
Yeah.
And those are factors that will basically show you if you're ready to walk down that aisle and say, I do.
Yeah. And how stable, if you're already in a relationship, how stable is your relationship? And these, if you have noticed that, maybe I haven't even had these thoughts before, and, just take the time and do it with your spouse now. It's never too late to do these things. And in fact, if you are in a marriage, that's the beautiful thing about a marriage, you can grow together. So if you recognize, hey, we kind of been stagnant in our marriage, let's take this advice and see where we can grow. What are things we can improve upon and things that we need to work on, or even just things that we need to be grateful that we've gotten this far on.
Right.
So, yeah, all of these things will play a big factor in creating more homes that are happy and healthy for our next generations and even for us to live in now.
Yeah, most definitely. Well said,
Yeah.
honey. Well said.
Yeah, you too. This was a great conversation. Thank you guys for tuning in. Marriage Fit Fridays are always fun.
Yep.
We're going to miss you guys over the weekend, but we're going to prepare for some good stuff. Got some clips coming. We're going to really figure out some ways to integrate our live streams into smaller clips. So for those who missed the live streams, you guys can actually see what we've been talking about. So also, yeah, call in. Remember, this is a call-in show. So if at any point you guys want to have something to talk about, or you want our advice, or just in general want to share some great wins and successes that you have had in your relationship, this is the platform for that. We want to show the great things about marriage, show the great things about a relationship, so that people want to come together, because there is no other relationship more important, more beneficial than the man and the woman coming together to build a solid house.
Right. And then we don't have to stick on the topics either. So if you
Yeah.
have a burning question and you just want to, interject into what we're talking about and then sidestep, and we can talk about with you and then guide you through as well. So we can
Yeah.
provide that insight. So, even if you want to remain anonymous, you can go ahead and send us a question. You see the ticker at the bottom. Go ahead and submit a question, and then we can help you with that as well. And we can talk about that on the next episode.
Yep.
Yeah. So by all means, we really appreciate you coming out. Thank you, for, viewers. We thank you all for joining us every day. And you all have a wonderful weekend. Peace.